Hey everyone, welcome to the Let's Create series, a series where we'll create mechanics from popular games using blueprints. Today we'll be creating wall running from Titanfall 2. This is also similar to the wall running you'll see in Mirror's Edge and Lucio from Overwatch. So to start off, we're going to duplicate our FPS controller once again, and this will be the Titanfall controller. We are then going to go into the FPS game mode and make sure we change it from Farah to our Titanfall controller, compile that, and save it. And then we're going to open up the Titanfall controller. And what we're going to do is we're going to create our own jump, as we need to create our own jumping system so it works properly with our wall running. This system is the exact same system we used in our Genji video. One thing we need to correct though is we need to add stop jumping here, and then what we're going to do is delete jump, and we're going to create the exact same system. So I'll go through it briefly. If you want a more in-depth explanation, check out the Let's Create Genji video. So from pressed, we go into do n, and then in do n we set this to 2. And then after that we go into switch on int, and I'll explain all of this once we get it up and running. And then from here we add pins. So we want 3 pins all up, so 0, 1, 2. For 1 and 2 we're going to do a launch character. So let's quickly explain what happens here. And one other node, to reset all of this, we go to events on landed, so when we touch the ground it resets everything. Now, what is happening here is that when we press space, it goes into do n, which has a counter of 2 for n. This then goes to switch on int, which starts at 0. So when you press space once, it goes to 1, which is going to launch the character. That is the normal jump once. When you press space again, it's going to go into the double jump, which is the 2 pin here, which is the second switch. Once it hits 2, it can no longer go further forward than the number 2, so it will only be able to reset once you hit the ground. Once it's reset, then you can jump and double jump again. The reason why I wanted to create my own and use launch character rather than use the one developed in character movement is to override the Z and to put our own custom amount. So I'm just going to make this 420 for now. So overriding the Z is really important for our double jump, because you can, in Titanfall 2, you're actually using a boost jump, and it's not really taking into account your velocity too much. So we're using launch character to combat using our velocity when we are falling during the jump, and I can illustrate this later for you. The next thing we're going to do is use an event, begin play. And we're going to set up something which will be explained a bit more later, which is our set plane constraint enabled. The reason why we're using this node and we want to tick enabled is because later on we're going to use something called plane constraint. This is going to limit the character moving on the Z axis, which is up and down, when we are wall running, which you will see later on. We can just call this our begin play, and this is where we can initialize anything at the start. Now we're just going to quickly compile, save, and make sure our double jump is working. So jump, double jump. So that's working, and when you hit the ground it resets. The next thing we're going to do is get into the wall running, and before that we need to go to our viewport and we need to set up a capsule collider so we can test the wall running. Now we have a default capsule collider, but if you scroll down you'll notice it's using the pawn collision, which is blocking a bunch of things, which we definitely do need for the game. That way we don't go through walls and fall through the ground. But what we do need is to make another capsule collision, and this will be our wall detection, and we're going to set this up to be a tiny bit bigger than the player. And the only reason I want to do that is in case the player, so there's a little bit of buffer room between the player and the wall for wall running. If you don't want that, just make sure the radius isn't too far out. The next thing is just make sure we have generate overlap events ticked and overlap all dynamic. It should be that by default. And you can see here in the collision presets, it's going to overlap everything rather than block out things. Now that we have that done, keep wall detection selected, right click and type in on component begin overlap. Now, this is what we wanted with our wall detection, so make sure it says wall detection in here, and now we can tell when we're overlapping other actors. And to start off, we're going to create a sequence. And the reason we want a sequence is because we're going to be running two things off this wall detection. The first thing is, if we do hit a wall, I want to reset our jump. Now, the walls are going to be tagged. This means you will not be able to infinitely jump up a building. You will only be able to wall run on specific surfaces. The next thing is we need to set the player's direction when they hit the wall. So if you go to down here and create a new variable, we can call this the player direction. And we're going to set this to a vector. We're then going to drag this out and use set and drag this into here. The reason why we're setting the player direction is because the moment they touch the wall, we want them to go in a very specific direction forward. If we were to get this on the go, the player might rotate a certain way and they would go forward, not along the wall, but in a weird direction, maybe to the left. So what we want to do here is we want to get the forward vector of the first person camera. So the moment they hit the wall, we'll get to the first person camera and the forward vector, because you need to be facing the wall in order to jump onto it. So there we have the camera. And the next thing we're going to do is set up a branch. And this branch, we need to check if the player is hitting the wall, if the player is hitting the wall, if they're hitting the tag, and if the player is falling. The reason, and I'll explain why the falling bit is important in a moment. So from other actor, we are going to go to here and get actor as tag, and we're just going to call this run wall. And then we're going to get a and, so we can compare two booleans. So if not compare, sorry, so we can check that both of these booleans are occurring. And then what we're going to do is use a character movement. So we're going to get character movement. And the reason we want to get this is because character movement gives us access to is falling. The reason we want to check if we're falling is because we do not want the player to start wall running when they are just touching it on the ground level. We want it to only do this check if you are in the air, which means you're falling, and you are touching an actor that has this tag. Once we have done this, we are then going to make one more boolean. So we're going to call this on wall, and we're going to make this a boolean, which we're going to use quite a bit later, but we're not going to use just yet. So we're going to set this to true. And then we're going to go into our timeline. So we're going to add a timeline, wall run. And the only thing this timeline needs to do right now is if you double click it, we need it to loop. So it's like an event tick essentially sitting in the middle, which is going to continue running all of our wall run code, while this is the prerequisite stuff to see if we can wall run. So let's look at the things we need to go through. First of all, we need to make sure the player is holding space down, just like in the Farah video. In order to make sure that the player is holding space, we need to get player controller, and then we need to get the input key, so get input, and then we need key time down. The key in this case is the spacebar that we're going to hold down when we're on the wall, and then we're going to check if this is greater than 0. If it is greater than 0, we'll create a branch here. So if it's greater than 0, then we can initiate the wall running. The other thing I wanted to do as well is we have our on begin overlap. A great thing we can do is get our we can get our on component end overlap, and make sure we have wall detection selected again. So end overlap, and we'll get this add-on component end overlap. Now, when this is ended, we're going to create a sequence once again, because just like this function up here, we're going to make two things occur at once. So first of all, when you have ended the overlap, we're going to stop this from running. That way the loop will end. The second thing is, actually we're going to conclude this after. We're going to do this stuff up top first, but just keep in mind for now that we're going to finish this bit after. But when you hit an object, such as when you come off an object such as a wall, it will stop this timeline from looping, and it will only go back to this timeline once all of these checks occur again. The next thing we're going to do from this branch that we have here is we're going to create a new branch. So we've set on the wall here. We're going to check that we are on wall, and I'll explain why right after we have a few things set up. The next thing we're going to do is get into the functionality of the wall run, which is quite simple actually. We need to right click and get, we need to get character movement once again. So get character movement, and this is going to give us access to quite a few things. First of all, it's going to give us access to set gravity scale. Now, gravity scale is the gravity that the player currently will have. So if we set it to something like 0, the player's gravity will be disabled, which is what we want for the wall run. We don't want them to move down. The next thing we want to get from this is to drag out, and we want to set set plane constrained and normal. So this is what we set up earlier in our begin play. And what this is going to do is, if we type 1 into one of these categories, such as Z, we will be locked on the Z axis when we touch the wall, meaning we will smoothly run across the wall. We are then also going to, after this, we're going to add force, and we're going to make sure it's the character movement. And if you'd like, you don't have to use this one supplied here. You can just delete that and drag this here. And what's going to happen is we're going to hit the wall, no more gravity. We're only going to move on the Z. We're going to set it up so we move in the player direction, which is forward, and we're going to add force to that direction so we will smoothly move across the wall. In order to move across this wall, we need to set it up so we have some amount of force. And the force is going to be the player direction, and it's going to be the player direction times a float, which is going to then be put into force. Now this float is going to be our maximum speed. So, oh, actually, no. We're going to, we can actually type a value in here and use that for now. So we're just going to make it something like 20,000 and see how that works. The next thing I want to do was we are missing one big section. So this is the add force section. We are missing an entire section down here. And most importantly, we are not resetting our gravity when we hit the ground. And this is what this check here is for, and this check here. So let me go through this. So back here, what we need to do is we need to do a similar thing to what we have here with the actor has tag. So we need to get the other actor, and we need to check if actor has tag. If the actor does have the tag, and in this case it was run wall, so run wall, we are then going to go into this new sequence, which starts with a branch, of course, and this is the condition. In this section, what we're going to do is, this is where a lot of these nodes are going to come into play. So we're going to reset our gravity scale. So we're just going to grab that, Control C, Control V, and drag this down here. We're then going to set this into here to true and reset the gravity scale to 1. We are then going to go, well, if we are no longer holding space, we should probably set our gravity to 1. And also, if we are not on the wall here, we should also set it back to 1. So I'll just drag that out there and put this up here. And the next thing we're going to do is reset our plane constraint normal. So drag here, set plane constraint normal, character movement, and we can just delete this node and drag this one into here. And we can probably bring this a bit closer. And by making it all 0, we're no longer having a z of 1. And the final thing we have to do is drag this out and set on wall, which should be at the bottom. So set on wall back to false, because we are no longer colliding with it as we have ended the overlap. And with that, we can actually test this out. In order to test this out, we need to go maybe into a section over here, and I'm just going to drag this out here a little bit. We're then going to drag this wall out to here, and in the search, go to tag, actor, and we'll call this the run wall. And we'll also drag one out here just to test this. So if I hit play, let's see how this works, if it does. Let's double check that. So double jump, so run, wall, nope. Let's see what's happening. So it's the run wall, double check, run wall. Oh, and we must also make sure that the collision has generate overlap events, or else it won't actually check the overlap. So let's see that again. And there we go. Oops. So if I do this again, you notice that I was wall running, but that one is not generating the overlap event. That's why that one's not working. Sweet. So let's just quickly expand this so we can see how it fully works. And then we have quite a few extra things to cover. So run, wall, run, wall. Works really nicely. It doesn't matter where you're looking, which is good because you want to be able to shoot in different directions. And our wall running is working quite nicely. And do remember it has to have the tag to wall run on. So the things I wanted to change is you'll notice if I wall run and press A that you'll fall off. So if I just press a button, you'll fall off. We don't really want that. So, or at least I personally didn't. I just wanted to stick to the wall run. So let's first of all just comment this, and we'll call this the wall run. And then we're going to go into our movement input. We're going to drag these out. We're going to get the on wall, and then we're going to make 2 branches. So branch, Control C, Control V, and the condition is on wall. We'll plug this into here, and if we are not on the wall, add movement input. So make that when it's false. So now if I go back to my wall run, so once again, not these walls, but any of these walls, my wall run cannot be interrupted, which is really great. Whoop. And you can double jump into a wall. So it works really well. So the only other thing I want to do was set up a mini course to show you guys that it works pretty damn well, even if you have them separated apart and in different rotations. So I'm going to make that, and I will be back once it's made. Thanks for watching, everyone. In the next video, we'll be polishing the wall running with sound effects and extra mechanics. That video will be out in the next few days. If you enjoy this content, consider supporting me on Patreon. This series wouldn't exist and it wouldn't improve without my Patreons, so thank you everyone who is supporting me. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.